Here we are back for coverage of Grand Prix Detroit. This is round 2. Looks like on our left-hand side we have Ben Stark, Luis Scott Vargas, and Eric Froelich. I think I've heard of one of those guys before. How about you?
I've heard of at least one.
And on the right side we have actually a family team, father, son, uncle, Robert, Kyle, and Dennis. We're going to jump down to Luis Scott Vargas and Kyle Thiel. Looks like on the right-hand side, Kyle has a Fetid Imp on turn 2, attacking into Luis's Leaf Gilder. How do you like the Fetid Imp?
I think Fetid Imp is a fine card. When I first saw it, I thought it was going to play better than it actually does. Because normally, Death Touch creatures that cost a small amount of mana are just something that I absolutely love in all limited formats.
Yeah.
But here, it actually does tie up your mana pretty well, and people have an opportunity to draw outs to it. One thing I do like, though, is it holds back Thopters indefinitely while also providing you a nice option to trade against bigger things that your opponent might play.
That's a very good point. And Kyle followed up with a Despoiler. 3/1 can't block. Luis, on the other hand, just opting to develop his hand in mana, that Gilder powering out a Llanowar Empath.
And now, stuck on 2 lands, Kyle. That's rough.
Yeah, especially, you don't imagine monocolored decks in this format, although that's very possible. Sometimes, you have a monocolor deck, maybe mono-red, a black-green deck, and then like a blue-white deck. But looks like he's just offering the trade here. Of course, the Despoiler can't block, so might as well attack with it.
And Luis, normally that would seem like it might be long-term card disadvantage because of the way that the Despoiler works, but that Llanowar Empath is, it finds itself a new card anyway. I don't think he actually got a card off it. I think he scryed 2 to the bottom and found an island, but usually he'd break even there.
All right, Kyle hitting his 3rd land, which happens to be an island, so now we know the 2 colors of his deck. He does look like he has a Whirler Rogue in his hand as well as like a Nantuko Husk. Very powerful cards. What do you think about Luis's deck so far?
We haven't seen much. We've seen a lot of Luis. Luis loves mana guys. If it's blue-green and just this, playing doofy stuff. He's playing 3 fewer colors than he normally does when he drafts, but it does seem like a very Luis deck.
This Gilder continuing to power out cards for Luis. Rock Smaller, one of the best green commons, I think, in the format.
Yeah, that's a card that seems to go a lot later than it should when you draft.
And the nice thing is, it's a single green too, so it doesn't tie up your mana. You're not required to have a double green, like a lot of cards of this caliber generally do. Kyle continuing to hit his land drops, hit his 2nd blue. You know what that means? We might be seeing a Whirler Rogue here.
And what's particularly exciting about Whirler Rogue here is that he can tap the Thopters that are being made immediately and use them to get the Jessian Thief into the red zone, and then he's going to draw an extra card. So, it's pretty good.
I would say that's pretty dang good. Of course, if he does that, he's going to tie up his mana for the Rock Smaller, so the Fetid Imp wouldn't be able to block and necessarily trade with it. We'll have to see what his game plan is here.
And his life total is still high enough that he'd probably be able to take a few chunks.
Sure.
But with rocks, with the Rhinos having trample, it's getting hit twice by that, even if you're trading the 2nd time around, it can be rough.
Yeah, looks like he's tapping 3 mana, opting on multiple spells. We saw that Husk earlier. I can't quite tell what else is in his hand. Looks like he's consulting his teammates on what to do here. Looks like he is going to go with the Husk. Now, do you like that kind of play? Playing the Husk out, keeping the Fetid Imp mana up?
I do not like that line. I think that one of the things you really want to be doing, especially when you're playing a limited format, is you want to be using your mana most efficiently, and especially when you've missed land drops. I just want to be tapping out every turn. I know Fetid Imp encourages me not to, but right now, by keeping that Fetid Imp back, you're essentially stifling your own mana development, and Luis can just say, okay, I just moon attack with my Rhino, and then now you're in this awkward situation.
It's a completely fair point, and like you said with non-attacks with the Rhino, Luis opting just to attack with the Water Courser here. If you're in Kyle's position, do you just take the 2, potentially 3 damage that Luis is representing?
I think it's pretty dependent on what's in my hand, but I probably just take it.
That would make sense. Though you can, again, offer the trade with the Fetid Imp if you really wanted to.
I mean, there's an argument for that, especially if you're planning on tapping out for a number of turns in a row afterward, but...
Wow. So Luis follows up with another Rock Smaller after Kyle takes the 2 damage from the Water Courser. Kyle drawing for the turn. Hitting land, land, land. So pretty nice for him. At least he gets to play a game of Magic. That's really great for Kyle. He's able to play the Whirler Rogue this turn and leave up 1 black. How do you rate Whirler Rogue?
Whirler Rogue, I think it is the best uncommon in the
very
set,
best.
and I do not think it's particularly close.
not even Sentinels of Eternal Watch? I know
Sentinels is quite good. I think it is the second best uncommon.
Okay.
But I don't think it is a Whirler Rogue.
All right, so we see Kyle make the play that you had mentioned, tapping the Thopters immediately, because even though they have Summoning Sickness, they can still use the Whirler Rogue's ability. Jesse and Thief getting in, drawing Kyle an additional card for the turn. Now at this point, if you're Luis, you have 2 Rock Maulers. Do you make an attack into the Fetid Imp?
I think you do. And the fact that they have Trample, I mean, if he has any sort of trick, like a bounce spell or something, then he could really punish Kyle for having left mana open for so many turns, especially when he's been missing land drops. I think that this is the turn where you turn everybody sideways. I guess not the Leaf Gilder because it just gets eaten, essentially, but...
Now I'd say blue-green in this format is more about the tempo plays and kind of getting fast and, you know, stymieing your opponent's plays, getting Void Mages, getting Wild Instincts type effects. So you can really expect Luis to embellish on that. He's opting whether or not to attack with his Water Courser. Looks like he is shipping in both Maulers and the Water Courser itself. And we're going to see a snap block here from Kyle on one of the Rock Maulers. And Tuco Husk it does have a lot of creatures to eat.
It does.
Now, if, like you had mentioned before, Luis has a Disperse or anything like that to really get him, the Trample's going to get through. Kyle had sacked 1 Thopter here to the Husk, offering a trade, passing priority back to Luis. Luis weighing his options.
And I think if Luis does have like a Disperse, which it looks like he does, I think he might be well suited to wait for Kyle to sacrifice that other Thopter to the Nantuko Husk. Because it's a gamble, but it's a pretty safe gamble.
So it looks like he's dispersing the Fetid Imp.
I like that.
Okay.
It might mean he has a pump spell as well, actually.
That's a very good point, because now Kyle has the option to sack another creature to his Nantuko Husk to eat the Mauler. We'll see if that's the line that Kyle's going to take. And in fact, we do see a Might of the Masses from Luis on the still blocked Mauler. Now Kyle has the opportunity to still kill the Mauler here. Is that even worth it, though?
Yeah, at this point, if you're killing the Mauler, you are... if you want your Nantuko Husk to live, then you have to sacrifice all of your creatures. If you want to trade, you're likely sacrificing your Rogue and your Thopter, and then you're just trading, and you're left with a Jessian Thief against a 6/6 Trample, a Water Courser, and a Leaf Gilder.
Water Courser getting in for 2 for Luis.
And the Rhinos are getting in for the full 4 because of Disperse and Trample, so it's pretty nice.
Looks like the Jessian Thief, though, maybe go a little bit uncontested here if he wants to attack with it. Of course, that card having prowess. Ooh, I see a Mage Ring Responder in Kyle's hand. No wonder he was so willing to immediately get in with the Thief after he played the Whirler Rogue. What do you think about the Mage Ring Responder? I know it's very, very powerful, just very slow and kind of dirtily.
I think it's a good card. It's difficult, though. The casting cost is so high, and people have started catching on that they're main decking cards like Caustic Caterpillar, Conclave Naturalist is just one of the better uncommons in the set.
And actually, you mentioned Conclave Naturalists. Luis does, in fact, have that card in his hand, so if Kyle just jams the Mage Ring Responder on turn 7, he might be in a world of hurt. Revolving Wilds now for both players.
And Conclave Naturalist is the type of card that a player like Luis would definitely recognize its power level better than a lot of other people might. It's something that he's seen before. He knows what that 4/4 attached to a 2-for-1 for a reasonable cost can do to a game.
I've seen a lot of people splashing for the Conclave Naturalists, just again, like you said, because it's so powerful and so easy to do. All right, so Jesse and Thief got in there, drew Kyle a card. He's playing Priest of the Blood, right?
That's an interesting card. I mean, it can be pretty powerful, but I've seen a lot of games where it doesn't do much.
The Priest, of course, losing you 2 life every upkeep of yours, but it does get attached with a 5/5 flying demon. I mean, I still think that card is very, very powerful.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Just does everything you want. Now, the rock's smaller. The thing is, if it attacks, Kyle has the opportunity to block with the priest, and then, you know, he won't be taking that damage, I guess.
that still seems like a fine deal for Luis.
Sure. Effectively trading the 6/6 Trampler for the 5/5, I would assume, barring no tricks.
Well, it depends also. I mean, if Luis has a trick like, per se, claustrophobia, then he might want to put that on the 2/2 instead of on the 5/5. No, the 5/5 is probably the safer play. But by putting it on the 2/2, you get a good attack with your 6/6 Rock Maulers, and then you're also forcing your opponent to take that damage, and then it's just tons of upside there for him.
Claustrophobia would almost turn into like a stab wound if it was played on the priest, you know?
Yeah.
But I do like the play. Claustrophobia on the demon token. Luis weighing his options, what attacks he wants to make, or if he wants to make any at all. He knows that the 2 life is probably going to be good, but a 6/6 Trampler getting into the red zone. And you just have to snap off this block, right? If you're Kyle.
I think you have to. I mean, you're saving yourself 4 points. You're at 10.
All right, so he's going to take 4 trample damage. He won't take the 2 on upkeep. Luis just playing another land and passing the turn. Kyle fetching at the end of Luis's turn. He's 1 mana away from that Major Ring Responder.
Yeah, we know that that's not going to be a very good one.
That's under the assumption that he does draw another land. Kyle has drawn a number of lands in succession, but he has been drawing multiple cards a turn, so I guess that's fair.
Yeah. When you draw 2 cards a turn, you start hitting your land drops.
Kyle moving the deck over. He thought it was Luis's deck. Kind of funny there. He did hit the land number 7. And he still has a bunch of other cards in his hand. Ooh, I think I saw an Alhalmaret as well.
Ooh.
Oh, but he's going with the Mage Ring Responder.
Of course he is. I mean, you kind of have to there, right? And then...
Yeah, the Rock Smaller still bigger than the 5/5 Flyer. Oh!
Oh, well, that's all you need is a Rogue's Passage. And that card shines like a diamond in the blue-green strategy.
And Kyle being at 6 life, unblockable 6/6 Trampler. And the nice thing is, Luis doesn't have to show Kyle now that he has Naturalists in his deck.
Yeah, we were, dreading the 2-for-1 taking out that super-powered card, but he didn't even need to show it to him.
He didn't even need to show it to him. And I like that, too. Sandbagging the Rogue's Passage a lot of the time. So you get a nice view of the players.
All right, so it looks like we're going to go over and check out the match between Ben Stark and Robert Thiel.
Oh, well, this game appears just to be ending. Ben winning that game. I think I saw sort of the Animist on his side of the board.
So a clean sweep of game 1s here for Ben Stark, Luis Scott Vargas, and Eric Froelich.
Yeah.
2 Hall of Famers, 1 Hall of Famer elect. The contents of this team.
I like the Thiel troop wearing all of the same Texas A&M. They got their theme going on for them. Actually, we can take a look at the deck lists too if we wanted to.
Yeah. Let's check these out.
Alrighty. So for Ben's deck that we kind of just briefly looked upon, he was black-white. Looks like he's playing an Auramancer, so I would assume he's got a big bevy of enchantments, or maybe just a few value ones. I see a Sentinel of the Eternal Watch, Gideon's Phalanx. And remember, for these team sealed events, it's not like a normal sealed, although sometimes you get very powerful sealed decks. A lot of the times it's more like a very, very powerful draft deck. Coming into Eric Froelich's match.
Yeah, it's almost like block.
And on Eric's side of the board, we see a ton of Thopter tokens, Hangerback Walkers chilling in the graveyard that had just died to something. Both players seem to be on mono red. So we talked about this before. Sometimes in Team Sealed, you're able to build a very cohesive mono-color deck. Although I guess I see a Shambling Ghoul in Eric's hand, so maybe he had to discard a few cards.
Hey, there's a Hangerback Walker in his graveyard. It looks like that's doing most of the work, most of the heavy lifting this game.
Yeah.
But yeah, no black mana here for Eric. Still holding on.
Fortunately for Dennis, he does have a Skyreach Giant, which, you know, can reach his large hands into the air.
Oh!
Boy! So you were talking about Chandra's Ignition beforehand. Dennis targeting his Giant, dealing 4 damage to every other creature and Eric. And that's just going to leave the board completely empty. Eric now desperately looking for something to do to block a 4-3. How would you rate Chandra's Ignition? Is that the top rare? One of the top rare? Is it the Tragic Arrogance?
I feel like Chandra's Ignition is probably number 1.
Yeah.
I've seen it win games that are not reasonable to win. Too many times for me to not pick that card. This is my pick for the card to open.
I think I would agree. The art depicting Chandra getting her spark. Firefiend Elemental and a Mage Ring Bully, it looks like, for Dennis to follow up. Oh, I take that back. He's playing an Infectious Bloodlust, and actually we see one already in his graveyard. So he has multiple Bloodlusts. That card, +2/+1, and an aura, giving the creature haste. Eric forced to chump with his Subterranean Scout, and scoops it up. So it looks like Eric and Dennis are going to go to game 3.
Yeah, Dennis able to even that one up. Peels the game off the one of the absolute best players in the world. The second best player, according to the top 25 pro rankings.
Of course, he's still going to make it out to the World Champs, which we're all looking forward to. Let's go back to our middle match, Luis Scott Vargas versus Kyle Thiel. And we're off to a normal start, both players with Evolving Wilds. Luis leading with Island, Kyle with the Swamp.
Yeah, look at this limited mana fixing that we see.
Do you like splashing in this format?
In Team Sealed, I don't think you ever really have reason to do it. Occasionally you might. Your deck might need something very specific. But in general, in this limited format, I think there are occasions to splash. I have splashed cards. I think normally when you're splashing cards, you're a more mid-range type of deck. You're playing things like Return Centaur, you know, like 2/4s. You have Shambling Ghouls, you have 2/3s. As long as you have things that have more than 2 toughness and 2 power, I think you can have a deck where it could be correct to splash big cards.
Yeah, I think I agree too. So Kyle cast a turn 3 Read the Bones, Luis having the Clash of Wills to counter it. Now that might be problematic for Kyle if he kept kind of a slower hand with the Read the Bones to try to, or kind of get there. He's following up with a Whirler Rogue now. I bet Luis wishes he had that Clash of Wills back. And I think you're right, man. Whirler Rogue, just so powerful.
Yeah.
Luis following up with a Separatist Void Mage, bouncing one of the tokens. The nice thing about it is Whirler Rogue, you don't have to just tap the 2 tokens that the Whirler Rogue produces. You can tap any 2 artifacts to give a creature unblockable.
Yeah, Alchemist Vial.
Sure, yeah.
We saw at the Pro Tour people tapping equipped Ghost Fire Blades to get guys in.
Yeah. Looks like they're trading off the Whirler Rogue for the Separatist Void Mage. Following up with a Ringward and Owl. I do like that card in the top end of blue decks. How about you?
I like it also. I think it's a very fine card. Usually makes the cut when I pick it.
I don't think it matches up very well versus a 4/4 Rock Smaller, which again we see Luis just jam on turn 5 here. I think Kyle drew a second Whirler Rogue.
Oh, wow.
Good card. 2 of the best uncommon. Seems decent enough. Kyle getting in with his flyers here. Of course, Luis can't block. Now Kyle's opting to play the Fetid Imp in his hand instead of developing out another Whirler Rogue. I think we saw Disperse in Kyle's hand as well, so it looks like he wants to play more of the tempo-y or traded game.
Yeah, one thing that's nice about this play too is that when you attempt to block and Death Touch your Fetid Imp, the fact that you have the Disperse means that if Luis tries to hiccup your play with some sort of trick, then you can just one-up him.
That's a great point. Luis tapping 3 here. Anchor to the Ether, targeting the Fetid Imp. So that's going to go back on top of Kyle's library. Luis is going to get a scry. And of course, we know Kyle has that disperse, which he indeed does use on Luis's Rock Smaller, who follows up with the Jessian Thief. So it's nice that he had a follow-up play. Didn't just take his whole turn. Whose deck do you think is favored here?
I mean, 2 Whirler Rogues is a big game. Then again, Rock Smaller is a card that actually matches up pretty well against Whirler Rogue in general, especially when you combine it with some sort of trickiness. So
Kyle playing the role of beatdown. Again, just all of these flyers that Luis doesn't have anything currently to deal with. And we're going to see the post-combat second Whirler Rogue. It is definitely a beating. So if you're Luis, you probably can't just replay out the Rock Smaller if you can help it, right? You gotta.
Yeah, you have to try to affect the board right now. You're at 11. Too much is coming in too fast.
Luis playing Claustrophobia on the Ring Warden Owl, triggering Prowess on the Jessian Thief, attacking in. Kyle now opting to block with one of his tokens so that Luis doesn't get to draw a card. And follow up Starfish.
Not too bad.
He's indeed making some progress. He did get to draw not draw an extra card, but take care of one of the flyers for Kyle, who still looks like he has 3 spells in his hand, which does not bode well for Luis. We know he has the Fetid Imp that was previously anchored.
Ooh.
So a Stratus Walk going on the Whirler Rogue.
Yeah, now it's 4 points of evasive power here.
Stratus Walk, blue aura enchantment that's going to draw a card and give a creature flying.
And that's a huge difference because it cuts the number of turns that it's going to take for Robert to win this game in half.
Absolutely. Kyle currently all about the evasive creatures. And a post-combat Fetid Imp. There it is again. Still with the flyers. Upkeep Scry for Luis Scott Vargas.
I wonder what he can keep here in this color combination.
He might have to find a big flyer of his own. There are like Hitchclaw Recluses. Anything that can maybe reach. He does have access to a lot of mana, so he's able to do multiple things at turns, potentially. But one of the cards we know is the Rock Smaller, so that's definitely not going to be good enough in this position, especially if Kyle's sitting at 20 still. Separatist Void Mage number 2, bouncing the Fetid Imp, allowing the Jessian Thief to get in.
I like it.
So we do see a lot of the bounce effects in Luis's deck, like we were talking about before, the blue-green kind of tempo-y decks.
Yeah, at this point, it seems like Robert's pair of Whirler Rogues are taking this one home pretty handily, but anything could happen. I mean, the major problem is that if you do, bounce the biggest of the threats, then it's an even bigger problem for you. Yeah. So I think what Luis would need right now is some sort of like big reach creature to just go unmolested. Something like, Sky Snare Spider might be good enough. Dwynen.
Now, what other things could Luis potentially have that could stabilize him, I guess, in this board? Because he's still getting beaten down for 4 in the air. And Kyle still has another follow-up flyer here, even more.
Yeah, now those reach cards aren't even good enough anymore.
And we see another upkeep Scry, Luis frantically digging. This is only game 2. Luis is up a game, so if Kyle takes this one, it will be moving to a game 3. Another Claustrophobia for Luis, targeting this time the Whirler Rogue. Luis getting in with both the Jessian Thief and the Separatist Void Mage. Of course, the Prowess triggered off of the Claustrophobia for the Jessian Thief. Now, do you block here just to negate a card draw from Luis?
I think so.
Because you already have enough lethal damage anyways?
Yeah.
And it looks like, Luis sees the writing
on
on the wall.
It looks like he's looking for a specific card.
We'll see a game 3 from Luis and Kyle momentarily.
A lot of these matches here going to game 3.
Back to the overview of the players. All right, we're going to move over to Ben Stark versus Robert Thiel. And we see a pretty cluttered board state. Wow. So look at on Robert's side of the board. What's going on over here?
Okay, so Robert has a pair of Sentinel of the Eternal Watch in play. And that means that every time it's Ben's turn, he gets to tap down 2 creatures. Both players have a lot of lifelink on the table, or potential lifelink. This could be, this game looks like it's way in Robert's favor. Seems these family members like to have 2 copies of really good uncommons in their decks.
And like we were talking about before, Sentinel, Eternal Watch, and World War probably the top 2 uncommons in the format. So having access to 2 in 2 different decks is pretty silly. Wild Instincts taking care of, is that the Blood Curse Knight? I couldn't see exactly.
Yes.
Okay.
That was Blood Curse Knight. Blood Curse Knight quite a bit better in this Team Sealed format than it is in a normal draft, as opposed to taking it somewhat early and then having to take weaker cards in order to be able to build around it. Here, you can just see right away, okay, I've got these suppression bonds, I've got these enchantments I want to play anyway. Now I've just got this undercosted lifelinker.
And I think Black-White is known for the enchantments, or having the most enchantments, the most high powerful enchantments. We see one of them on the board right now on Patron of the Valiant. They got suppression bonds. So on Robert's turn, he only has 2 good targets for the Sentinels, and that's going to leave Ben with nothing to block. Sentinels being a 4/6 Vigilance, added to the fact that it taps down a creature every turn. That is just very, very powerful.
It just plays defense so well while also crashing in, because you get to tap anything that's going to be big enough to tangle with it.
Exactly. We'll see if Ben can do something to help him stabilize. Sentinels of his own now. There are 3 Sentinels of the Eternal Watch on the battlefield. Do you think this game is going to go long and grindy?
I think Robert's got this one pretty handily, actually.
You think his 2 pairs of...
I think the pair is still good enough.
Okay. Ben tapping down one of Robert's.
Although I guess they kind of just bump now, so it's... Yeah, this is complicated.
You see a few of the smaller white creatures in Robert's hand. Topin Freeblade, one of the best 2-drops, definitely. But not doing so much on this board. Looks like we have a 3/2 Knight just a little bit off the board. Going to Ben's turn. At this point, Robert's completely empty on cards in hand. Ben still holding onto a grip. Going to combat, Robert taps both defeated in, so Ben just has to pass the turn here. So looks like you're right. We're just going to see a lot of bouncing back and forth until somebody can find something to push through.
And I think Robert is getting very close to being able to just go wide here, even with the Sentinel of the Eternal Watch on Ben's side of the table. One Sentinel's going to be tapped, but then he can really rumble with everybody else if he sees a reason to do so.
Yeah. Ben tapping down again one of the Sentinels. I think we saw a Conclave Naturalist in Robert's hand. He might be sandbagging that until Ben draws one of his enchantments.
I'd be very surprised if the Empath doesn't come in also.
Robert's doing a little math here. Really attacking in. Multiple creatures of his have Vigilance. We see the renowned War Oracle being blocked by the Sentinel. And the Avens blocking the Topin Freeblade. Alright, so Robert opted not to get in with the Empath. Do you think you would have made that attack there?
I would have attacked with the Empath also, and then if Ben doesn't have anything, you win. But yeah, I guess he wanted to make sure that he wasn't going to get blown out by some sort of big combat trick or something.
Sure. Things like Celestial Flare in the format, of course. And Ben been holding onto a few cards. Well, Robert does have Ben down to 1 life, but again, the Sentinels bounce off each other.
Yeah, and it's odd because when going wide, you really want to, when you're going to go in, you want to go in with everybody. And I think that one of the best lessons to learn as a Magic player, especially in games of Limited, is that you want to be acting as a well-oiled machine. Whatever it is that you're trying to do, you want to be all in on that plan. You can't really, be halfway with anything.
Sure.
Yeah. Ain't no such thing as halfway wizards. you know.
So for Robert, you think attacking with everything would have been the correct line? I see.
I think so,
But
yeah.
it looks like Ben's going to just scoop it up here. Robert taking down this game. We're going to have game 3s for all of these matches. Get another nice overview of the players. All right. We're going to hop down back to Luis and Kyle for game 3. We saw Kyle last game with double Whirler Rogue. Of course, just out-tempoing Luis's draw. But Luis does have a Hitchclaw Recluse now.
Yeah, I mean, Hitchclaw Recluse will do pretty well against the army of Thopters that Robert's trying to put on the table. Obviously, doesn't match up great against Imps, but you're not going to die to Imps. Imps are going to stifle your opponent's mana. They're going to get held back. The Imps are kind of like a good thing for Luis in many ways here, because when your first 2 plays are Imps and you're behind your opponent in terms of playing lands, you're going to be forced to leave open mana a lot, and then that's going to give Luis the opportunity to tap out, to get really far ahead on the board, and then if he has a trick or 2 to go along with, then he's going to be home free.
Yeah, that's a really great point. If you're kind of pinched on mana, holding up a swamp, for the Fetid Imps is a really big drawback. Luis here weighing his options. I would imagine he would attack with the Void Mage. You think so?
Yeah, I think not attacking with the Void Mage is very surprising, to say the least, if that's the line, but I don't think it will be.
Luis offering the trade for one of the Fetid Imps, and we know Luis has many large flyers, not flyers, but many large creatures in his deck, the pair of Rock Maulers being the ones we've seen the most of so far. Kyle opting to take the 2, land number 5 for Luis, and he's just going to play out one of the Naturalists.
Ooh, so it looks like Luis has a copy of Aerial Volley in his hand.
And what does Aerial Volley do?
Aerial Volley deals 3 damage divided as you choose among flying creatures. So, I mean, he can't kill both Imps, but he could kill a Thopter token and an Imp, or 3 Thopter tokens.
Which would probably be living the dream. And you know what? We do, in fact, see a Whirler Rogue in Kyle's hand. And I think he's going to make the same play here, where he plays actually a 3-drop to hold up the Death Touch on the Fetid Imp.
Wow.
Sphinx's tutelage from Kyle. Maybe not the most impactful thing on this board, but it might put in some work. Tutelage, what do you think about this on this board?
Oof. Well, so the play that was just made was an incredible play by Luis.
Yes.
The fact that he did it with that much speed. By getting in with all of his creatures, he encourages Robert to just, bump donuts with the Recluse, and then have the Conclave Naturalists just get eaten by Fetid Imp. But then because Robert has to activate the Fetid Imp to trade with the Naturalists, that gives him the opportunity to Aerial Volley and kill both Imps without losing any of his creatures. So he just killed 2 2-mana creatures that stifled his opponent's mana for a number of turns for 1 green mana.
Kyle looking desperately for more creatures here. Yeah, Jake, you're making a great point. Just completely stymieing everything that Kyle's doing. Of course, the Hitchclaw Recluse dealt 1 damage to the Fetid Imp, and then the Aerial Volley, like you said, finishing it off. So Luis just using his mana very efficiently here. Although Kyle does have 2 creatures to follow it up. Looks like Luis attacking in with the Conclave Naturalists. Now, I don't think Kyle blocked.
Well, he can't block because of Rogue's Passage.
Oh, I'm sorry. He used the Rogue's Passage. Thank you.
Yeah, Rogue's Passage is a card that I think was one of those things that's like, oh, I hope I pick it up late when people were first drafting the format, and now people understand, like, oh, if I want one, I have to take it, like, 3rd.
Now, how highly do you play it in these type of decks that Luis is playing?
I mean, if I'm playing green, I will take that card over most cards. Depending, like, if I'm other decks that are not playing green, I'm not a particular fan of Rogue's Passage even. It is a very powerful card, though.
All right, Kyle playing one of his Whirler Rogues. He has 2 very, very powerful cards on the battlefield. The Whirler Rogue and the Priest, both producing extra creatures. It looks like Kyle's deciding to attack here. Looks like he's going to make something unblockable.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to have to race this Rogue's Passage somehow, and he's not going to do it by sitting here and waiting. Yeah, it looks pretty bad for Kyle, though, because all Luis has to do is keep getting in with these Conclave Naturalists. Now, the next turn, Robert, he's going to fall to 5, then he's going to fall to 3 from the Priest. The thing here, though, is that Robert has represented that he has Disperse. And if Luis is going to dump all his mana into Rogue's Passage again, then he could find himself in some trouble here.
Claustrophobia for Luis targeting the Priest. And like we mentioned before, kind of like a stab wound type effect. So not only does...
Yeah, and that's just great, because now he can just send the whole team in.
Without fear of the Priest dying. Of course, the Priest continuing to do 2 to Kyle on his upkeep. What kind of things does Kyle need here to kind of stabilize from where he's at in this position?
Well, okay, so the thing is that if Kyle blocks and trades with a Void Mage, then he ends up, taking 6, and then he falls to 1 during his upkeep. If he just chumps the Naturalist, he's falling to 3, and then he's dead to Passage on a 1-power guy even. It seems like he's really going to need a card like Languish here if he wants to win the game. You just need to clear the board. Languish here would be absurd also, because it would leave him with a 5/5 flyer.
Yeah. Languish, of course, the 2 black, 2 colorless. All creatures get -4/-4 until end of turn.
And remember, they're working with 12 packs.
Yep.
It's not completely unreasonable for him to have a Languish.
So the Priest trigger goes on upkeep. Kyle going to 2 life now. And he's going to need to find a way to not only deal with his own Priest, but deal with the board that Luis is presenting.
Yeah, so on table C there, Eric Froelich managed to win his 3rd game against Dennis Thiel. So this match here, if Luis wins, will decide our round 2 feature. Thiel's putting up a good fight.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again,
forcing game 3s across the board.
Team Seal, we've seen nothing but powerful decks, and Eric only losing that game previously because he wasn't hitting his land drops on time.
Yeah, Eric with what looked like a mono red deck when we took a look in, but in actuality it is a black red deck.
I saw that Shambling Ghoul sitting in the discard pile, the graveyard. Kyle's just doing a little math here.
What's your take on that one, Shambling Ghoul, as far as the 2-drops go?
I think it's one of the better 2-drops. It's common. It's a 2/3.
It's a beast.
It bricks a lot of the renowned creatures that are so prevalent in the format. As long as you're on the play, sometimes your opponent can get underneath you.
Yeah, it's odd how well it matches up against Tobin Freeblade when you win the roll, and how poorly it matches up when you lose the roll.
Exactly. Kyle extending the hand. He just doesn't have enough answers for both the Priest and all of Luis's creatures. And so the team of Stark, Scott Vargas, and Froelich are going to take round number 2 here.
And that was a great match. And we got to see what could be considered the best team in the room. And they're playing against a family. And that's one of the cool parts about Team GPs is you run into these teams. You run into these teams where it's like, oh yeah, my 2 teammates, we've been playing Magic together for 12 years. Like, we're all buddies. We've been doing this forever. Well, everybody, that was our round 2 feature match with Hall of Famer Ben Stark, Hall of Famer Luis Scott Vargas, Hall of Fame elect member Eric Froelich playing against the Thiel family. We will be right back with more coverage here from Grand Prix Detroit.